Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody listen on 98.5 WNUW LP Aston or on the Newman Media app. My name is Joe Tusio, and welcome to the free agency special. Yes, as most football fans, if not all football fans, should know, tomorrow, free agency officially opens up for business in the NFL. Right now, it is the legal tampering period, or whatever the official name for it is, where teams can look at guys who they want to sign. Teams can make trades, but no official signings are really going to be made until the free agency opens tomorrow at 4 p.m. And before I get to everything, because this is going to be a really info-packed show, I'm going to be getting into a lot of things, breaking some news here. And let me just preface by saying this. Any signings that I may say that might go down are not actually officially signed yet. But it's going to be more of, this is who looks like it's going to be the front runner of who the team and player are going to come to an agreement to. And any trades that went down, as most Eagles fans know over the last 24 hours, the trades are not a finalized deal just yet, but the teams come to an agreement on who they're going to trade and what they're going to trade for. But I'm going to get into all that next hour. But before I get to that, the 18-year run of Peyton Manning's career in the NFL is officially coming to an end. The guy is one of the greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen play. Just an illustrious career. I mean, he's one of those guys. And see, that's the thing where you hear your mom or dad or your grandparents where where you hear them say, "Oh, I grew up watching this guy. This guy was, you didn't get to see him play, but when I grew up, this was the guy." This was one of those Hall of Fame guys that, once in a decade type of guy. Manning was our guy, or at least one of our guys. We grew up watching him. I mean, it's crazy to think that I was 3 or 4 when he first came in the league, and I'm 22 now, and he's just getting out of the league. And not a lot of players do that. And the guy has records that I don't think any player is going to break, at least in the next few years. Unless somebody plays for another 10 years, Rodgers or somebody like that. But there's just stuff he did in this league that players are going to look at and say, man, this guy was somebody that I looked up to. It was a guy that off the field, on the field, was just an outstanding guy, upstanding person. And it's just going to be interesting to see where his career goes from this point on. He might get a front office job somewhere. Somebody might like him. Elway went the same path. Manning might get that, or maybe he's a play-by-play guy, or whatever he may be. He's going to be great whatever he does at this point of his career as his 18-year run in the NFL comes to an end. But some other news regarding a retirement broke over the last couple minutes, and that is Calvin Johnson it's now official that he is going to be retiring for the NFL. And this was something I spoke about 3 or 4 weeks back that, Johnson was thinking about, well, maybe this was going to be his end in the NFL. Maybe he was going to come back. But now it is official. Calvin Johnson is officially going to be retiring from the NFL. Again, another guy that was maybe the best wide receiver I've ever seen play. Probably going to be a Hall of Fame type of guy. A guy that was, and his skill and the body, I mean, he was one of those guys where if you could create a Madden player, he was one of those guys at 6'5", 230 pounds or so, a guy that can probably run a 4.3, a guy that took over games no matter who threw him the ball. And that's going to be a big hole that the Lions have to fill. And I don't think anybody in the draft or anybody that they can sign is going to be able to fill the production, the leadership skills that he gave to that team and the impact that he had on that team. So, again, another guy retiring, Calvin Johnson, is officially retiring from the NFL. But let's get to some free agency stuff here, because that's what I'm on for today. Because this is where I get pumped, because it's great to see how teams, it's great to just hear rumors. And every fan knows that. Oh, I can't wait to hear who this guy signs. But it's important to see, how teams improve their team on the offensive side, defensive side of the ball, and how they can maybe adjust moves to fit some cap space, to create some cap space, to sign some guys or to trade for some guys. Now, before I get to of course, the big trades that went down, I was not on the radio last week, so I did not get to talk about Sam Bradford and his new contract that the Eagles signed him to 2 years, I believe $36 million or so. A deal that I think is a great deal for both sides. And why I think it's a great deal is the Eagles aren't locked up to him long term. They're not going to have to be with him for the next 6 years. They can get a look at him for 2 years. So if next year he comes out and he puts up 5,000 yards, Doug Peterson makes him look like a star, then you can maybe give him more years. But if he doesn't have that great of a year, you can get out of the contract after a year or two. So I think it's a great deal. And the thing is, if you want to make a playoff push, this might be the best option that you have. I know that you could trade up for a guy in the draft. I know a guy like Lynch might be there at the 13th pick. But that's an unknown. At least the Eagles know what Sam Bradford is at this point. So I think it's a great signing. Now, if they sign him 5 years for $100 million, then yeah, I would probably come on here and say that's a ridiculous deal that I don't know why they made it. But at least shows that the Eagles know what direction, at least on the offensive side of the ball, that they're going to go for. But let's get to the big news at hand. And that is, over the last 24 hours, Howie Roseman and the Eagles team is getting rid of the Chip Kelly era. 3 of the main guys that he brought in. As Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, a bunch of guys, multiple sources have announced over the last 24 hours that Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell are being traded to the Miami Dolphins for draft picks. And running back DeMarco Murray is being traded to the Tennessee Titans. I don't know if it's for picks or players, but 3 of Chip Kelly's guys are gone. And this was one of the things where it's a shocking thing because I did not expect them to do this early. Murray, I know probably over the last few weeks there was stuff of maybe he wanted to be traded, maybe he wanted to stay. But I didn't expect them to trade him this early. Especially considering that they didn't sign somebody to replace him. They didn't draft a guy yet. Ryan Matthews I guess he's the main guy for him now. But I don't know what, this is just an interesting dilemma that's been going on because it's just so much taken with so little time to just think about it. And the Murray trade, I do not understand, especially thinking that this offense might be what DeMarco Murray needs. When he came to Chip's scheme, it did not fit him at all. And I was not one of those guys that sat there and said, "Oh man, that's a 100% perfect fit. Murray's going to rush for 1,800 yards like he did last year. He's going to be a Pro Bowl guy. He's going to get the ball 300 times." No, he did not fit the scheme. Period. I don't see it. If a guy is an I formation running back, a powerful back that is behind arguably one of the best offensive lines, and you put him on a team where he runs these shotgun plays, these read option runs, where he has no time to decide where he's going to run, it's not going to fit his scheme, folks. Sorry about that. And it showed that when Chip Kelly was gone, Shermer took over for the last game. One of the first plays, they ran a normal I formation run to Murray. And what did he do? Ran for like 50-something yards and scored. So it shows that if he's in the right scheme, he can be good. Now, I don't expect him, I didn't expect him to come into this year and be the guy that he was 2 years back. Oh, he's going to rush for 1,500 yards now. Frank Reich and Doug Peterson are going to fix this scheme and he's going to be back to the way that he was. No. I did not expect that, but I did not expect them to trade him as early as they did. Now, to the other trade at hand. Now, earlier in the day, there was some rumors that were going out there saying the Dolphins and the Eagles were going to trade for Byron Maxwell, that maybe they're going to trade. And then later it comes on and says Kiko Alonso is also going to be included in that trade, and that shocked me, honestly. And the reason why it shocked me, again, these are 2 more holes that they have to fill on this team. Now, I get it. Maxwell was not the star that they thought he was going to be. Alonso was hurt and did not play as well as he did when he was with the Bills. He's not the guy that when they traded LaShawn McCoy, he was not the guy. I understand that. But now you have to replace those players. And you bring in Jim Schwartz to coach up the defense, a guy who is known to coaching pretty good defenses at this point. Who knows? Maybe those guys could have gone back to the way that they were. Maybe Byron Maxwell was going to be the shutdown guy that they thought he was going to be when they signed him to that $50 or $60 million deal. Maybe that's what they would have gotten. But I'll tell you this. Eagles freed up some cap space now. And that's great. But it's going to be interesting to see what they get in terms of the picks. Because if they get like a 5th round pick, I don't know if that's a great trade. The Dolphins, I think, got a great end of the deal. Because let's look at it from both team sides. Miami signs, let's say they even trade a 2nd round pick. Let's just say the Eagles get back their 2nd round pick. Dolphins get Maxwell, Alonso, and 2 of their holes that they have are now solved. So let's say the trade on the Dolphins side works out for them. Let's say Maxwell goes back to being the way that he was. The Dolphins hired Vance Joseph as the defensive coordinator for the team. He comes out. Maxwell is back to the way that he was. He's a number 1 cornerback, a guy that's going to be a top 10 cornerback for the next 5 years. He works out well. Alonso doesn't get hurt. The Dolphins re-sign him to a 5-year deal. He becomes the Kiko Alonso that was on the Bills. Just a guy that's all over the field making plays left and right. Now, most would say the Dolphins got the good end of the deal. And most would say the Eagles got the bad end of the deal. And it's not because of the production. It's because of the holes that they have to fill. And that's the big thing. Especially considering if the Eagles at this point were one of the teams where they had $50 million or so in cap space, okay, I can understand because then they can just go out and sign guys. But we know how that works out. There are some guys that are always given big deals and they don't pan out well. Byron Maxwell is one of them. And that was the one when people said, oh, Seattle, he's going to be the number 1 guy at the Eagles. No. It doesn't matter. He was with a team that had the best secondary in the NFL. And he played with Pro Bowl guys. So, yeah, he is good. But you can't throw him out there and be the number 1 guy and leave him all on his own and go up against the best guys by himself and expect him to be a superstar. Now, with the new team that he's on, maybe that works out. I don't know. But those trades just were shocking, especially considering that my dad, of course, is a Dolphins fan, and of course I try to, it's kind of funny because he wasn't really too excited. And I was just like, I think it was a great deal because it's not like you're giving up a star. It's not like you're giving up one of your guys that you need. You're giving up draft picks. And with Gase there, you need a new start. And they had holes all along the defensive side. Now they filled that. So it's just shocking. And over the next week or so, the Eagles are probably going to make more trades. Heck, they might make more trades today in hopes of maybe signing a guy coming up soon. But those 2 trades were the big things, of course, the Eagles fans were looking at. And it's... and then people are also going to say, and see, here's how I look at it, because people are also going to say, well, Joe, they got draft picks. Maxwell was making $9 million or $10 million per year. He wasn't worth it. You're right. He wasn't worth it. But he was not a scrub. Alonso was not a scrub. They weren't stars, but now you have holes to fill, and you don't have that much cap space. And if you want to re-sign a guy like Fletcher Cox right now, that's going to take up probably close to $15 million of your cap space, or you're probably left with $10 million or so to fill 5 or 6 needs. Good luck. Good luck getting stars. No. You sign a couple guys now and you go through the draft as most teams do it nowadays. And a lot of teams do that. Green Bay, Seattle, teams like that do not sign these stars. They sign a guy that can help here and there, and then they draft the guys that they need. So it's not just to get out of Byron Maxwell's deal. And yeah, you might get a draft pick, but if you expect to get three first round picks in return for these guys. It's not going to happen, folks. I'm sorry. Unless it does, and I will admit that I am wrong if that is the case. But I highly doubt that that's what the Eagles got in return for those trades. So some news just came out that according to Rand Getlin, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Sorry if I'm not. Looks like Kelechi Osemele, one of the best guards in the free agent class right now, a guy who a lot of teams are looking at. Eagles, maybe they were going to look to sign him. It looks like the Oakland Raiders are going to be his team. They didn't agree on a big deal yet. Of course, you can't do that until tomorrow at 4 p.m. But it looks like Oakland is going to be the team that he goes to. A great offensive lineman, a guy that can play guard, tackle if you need him to. A guy that I really liked coming down the draft a few years back. I mean, I think any team would love to have a guy like that. And he's going to get a big deal playing an interior offensive lineman. Playing guard and getting paid upwards of $10 million or so per year is not a common thing. But if he's that good, Oakland needs to protect Derek Carr. And this guy can definitely help. Some other news that just came out as well. According to Jason Cole, Mario Williams, the defensive end who was released by the Bills, a guy who, over his 8 or 10 years playing in the NFL, looks like he's signing with the Miami Dolphins. Now, again, this isn't a confirmed deal just yet, but it looks like the Dolphins and Mario Williams are going to be together for the next few years. And I think it's a pretty good signing. I mean, they need... See, here's the thing. Adam Gase needs players on that team. Olivier Vernon, a guy who I really like as a defensive end outside linebacker, a guy that can play in any scheme, well, he may not go back to that team. Miami may not re-sign him. And if Williams is there and if Cameron Wake can come back for 2 or 3 more years, Vernon may not be a guy that they have to sign then. So I think that's a great signing, a guy that plays, and especially the Dolphins are probably going to play in a 4-3. A signing that Williams is a natural 4-3 defensive end. And I think this scheme fits him perfectly. And he's not going to be a guy that they're going to have to say, go out there and play 99% of your snaps every single game. You can rotate him in with guys. If Vernon comes back, then you have maybe the best defensive end rotation, at least in the AFC East. Because you're playing up against some really good offenses now. So Williams is definitely going to be able to help that defense going forward. Now that I got that little bit of breaking news out of the way, let's see what the Eagles can do here. So, with around $27 million in cap space with the trades, it may be more, it may be less, but rounding it, maybe they're going to look to re-sign some guys. Walter Thurman is a guy that I think that they really need to re-sign. A guy that was signed as a low-level deal, a guy that didn't really probably expect to be a superstar, had a really good year. I would say he was maybe one of the best strong safeties this year. Had a very underrated year. Probably could have been a Pro Bowler if a team really needed him to play in the Pro Bowl. If somebody went to the Super Bowl or somebody got hurt, he probably could have stepped in and played in the Pro Bowl. And I think they need to re-sign him because that's, again, another need that they're going to have to fill. But the thing is, here's what is frustrating about a team like this is because I don't know where they're going to. I don't know how they're going to divvy up this cap space because if they want to re-sign Cox, and they're going to have to because the guy is probably the best defensive lineman, or at least one of the best defensive linemen in the league, and he's probably the best defensive player the Eagles got at this point. The fact that they aren't going to re-sign Cox, I highly doubt that's ever going to happen unless some team offers some ridiculous contract that the Eagles just can't match cap-wise. But I think Thurman is definitely a guy that if you don't re-sign Cox at least this year, maybe you re-sign him next year depending on what your cap space is going to look like. Thurman is a guy that I think they really need to sign. They need help in the secondary, especially if Byron Maxwell is gone now. Jenkins is probably really the only main piece on that secondary that you can look at and say, okay, here's a guy that we can look at. Thurman, if you sign him, your back end is at least good, and the guy can blitz, the guy can hit. He does everything well, and it's this position of, and it's one of those things that it's not that easy to fill. And if you get a guy like that, you can at least breathe a little bit of fresh air knowing that spot is filled. Nolan Carroll is another guy that had a very underrated year. Maybe the best Eagles cornerback, not the biggest name, but I think the Eagles probably want to re-sign him soon. And if you can get him on a cap-friendly deal, knowing if you're going to try to re-sign some guys, maybe he returns. And I think that they should. Because, again, Maxwell's gone. Who are you going to look at? Eric Rowe, to me, isn't ready to step in and be a star. I think if you give him 2, maybe 1, maybe 2 more years, he's got the size, he's got the range, he's got some great skills. Covers well, got good speed, but he's not ready to just be thrown as the number 1 guy. And if you throw him in against some of the guys he's going to have to go up against twice a year, and Dez Bryant, Beckham, stuff like that, he's going to get eaten alive if you put him one-on-one the entire game. Carroll, it's not a big signing. He's not like, oh my gosh, we signed Nolan Carroll. Let's go parade in the streets. No. But it's a signing that you can at least know that we at least got 1 spot filled. We don't have to worry about that. And of course, Fletcher Cox, if they can re-sign him, the sooner the better at this point, because he's just arguably their best. He might even be their best player, period, on either side of the ball. And if you don't re-sign him, that's somebody that you cannot replace, because he's just a star right now at this point. Maybe the best. Maybe he's going to be up there with Sue and Gerald McCoy for probably one of the best 4-3 defensive tackles, if that's where he plays in Jim Schwartz's scheme. He's going to be one of the best interior linemen in the league, if not already now. So maybe let's look at some targets that maybe the Eagles could look at to sign. So there are just some guys out there that maybe the Eagles could look to re-sign. From Elliott Shore-Parks from NJ.com to Tahir Whitehead is a guy that maybe the Eagles look to replace Kiko Alonso with. A guy that he's an underrated guy, got good size. He can make a lot of good plays. He's not the best linebacker. He's not going to command a big deal. So I think the Eagles could definitely look at him, and he can easily start. Jordan Hicks is going to come back. Kendricks is going to be there. So unless they trade him, I doubt that they trade him right now. But you got those 2 guys. Whitehead can at least come in and fill that role that Alonso had. May not fill it as well because Kiko Alonso maybe had more upside, but I think Whitehead can at least come in and shore up a starting role. And then, of course, Jeff Allen, the guard from the Chiefs, according to Jeff McClain, might be a target that the Eagles look at. He might be one of those guards. Doug Peterson might look at some Chiefs. Allen is a guy that they could easily look at. And here's the thing. In this class, a lot of interior linemen are going to get big contracts. Like I just said, Osemele is probably going to get $9 to $11 million per year. And for an interior offensive lineman, that's a pretty big deal. Allen, of course, played for the Chiefs, know how Doug's scheme works, could easily play at the right guard spot. You at least fill one of the holes on the offensive line, because that's what the Eagles need. If Bradford is going to be here, and if you don't really know what your run game is right now, at least you can shore up the offensive line, and Allen can help with that. He's an underrated guy, too. And that's the thing. Offensive guards don't get a lot of hype, but, it shows. If one of your offensive guards is hurt, it affects the game a lot on the offensive side of the ball. So I think Jeff Allen could definitely be a guy that they look at. But again, teams are probably going to throw money at these guys. And another guy to look at is Patrick Robinson, who played for the Chargers. This is coming from Josina Anderson on Twitter as well. Patrick Robinson right now is getting a lot of buzz as a cornerback that a lot of teams are looking at. Again, a guy that some rated as a really high cornerback in this year. He's got a couple good years left in him. I think he's 28 or 29. Okay size. If the Eagles, and here's the thing, he's not going to command 8 to 11 million per year. He's going to command probably 5 or 6, or maybe 4 or 5. You can get him on a 2 or 3 year deal. He can fill a spot for the Eagles that Maxwell's gone. Unless they want to go through the draft, which they might, because The secondary class in this year's draft is pretty good. And then another guy, and a lot of Eagles fans probably like this guy, is George Iloka, the safety from the Cincinnati Bengals. Probably one of my favorite secondary players in this free agent class, simply because the guy's 6'4". The guy can play all over the field. An underrated guy, had one of the best years a safety had this year. He wasn't a Pro Bowl guy, but he's definitely one of those underrated guys that if he goes to a new team, Malcolm Jenkins was the same way. In that year, Jarvis Byrd was the guy that, the safety that every team needs to sign. The Saints got him. Eagles got Malcolm Jenkins that same year, I believe. So far, Jenkins is looking like the better safety right now. So maybe Iloka is a guy that if they sign, maybe he comes out and can replace what Walter Thurman did. But he might command more money than what Walter Thurman might. And that's the thing. Do you want Thurman or do you want Iloka on this team? Because I think they're both really good. I think they're really good safeties at this point. But I don't think that he's going to... Personally, I think he's probably going to sign with Vikings or the Browns or something like that, where one of his coaches is a head coach at now. Zimmer is head coach of the Vikings right now. Safety is what they is what they could use. Iloka knows him. He played for him. So it's kind of like a really good fit at that point. And then some wide receivers Eagles could look at. This isn't a really good wide receiving free agent class. I think there are some guys, don't get me wrong. There are some guys that I think they can make some pretty good plays, but they're not, they're not star guys. They're not star players. And that's the thing, is that the Eagles right now need a true number one guy. They do not have that number one, that star. Matthews right now had a really good year. I will give him that. And I think he can play all over the field and probably in the slot. That's probably his best spot. But they just need a star, and there's not one out there. Alshon Jeffrey got the tag, so they're not going to sign him. So one guy I would look at is probably Brian Quick. Now, this is a guy that probably not a lot of fans know. He plays for the Rams. Guy's got great size. He was a second-round pick. I really liked him coming out of Appalachian State. He's like 6'3", 6'4". Got pretty good speed. And it's one of those underrated guys that the Eagles could give him a 2 or 3 year deal. $3 or $4 million per year might do it. And he might be able to make some plays for you. And it's one of those things where I think if you get one... Now, if you go into the draft, which they might do, and they get a wide receiver, maybe that's how you fill that spot. But if you don't, I think there are some wide receivers at least that you can look at and say, well, the guy's not a star, but I think if we sign him, he can make some decent plays for us. Marvin Jones is another guy that they could probably look at. A guy that was number 2 wide receiver next to AJ Green. Got good size. I don't know if the Eagles are going to just throw money at him, because maybe a team will, because like I said, the wide receiving class and free agency this year isn't that strong. So maybe teams just do throw money at him because he's maybe the best option out there. And then one of the offensive linemen besides Jeff Allen that they could have looked at was Kelechi Osemele. But as I reported earlier, he's probably going to the Oakland Raiders. So that's probably not going to happen. So since I got the Eagle stuff, at least for right now, out of the way, I'm going to basically for the next half hour or so, I'm basically going to break some news, go over some guys who teams are looking at signing. Whatever news I can find, I will report it to you. But there are some signings that have gone on over the last 24 hours and most recently over the last hour or so. The Colts re-signed tight end Dwayne Allen to a 4-year, $29 million contract, reported by Ian Rappaport and other people as well. A guy that did not have a lot of targets this year, but a guy that can block well, a guy that can catch well. Fleener is a guy that I would have thought they would have signed first, though. I think he played with Luck. He knows Luck. Got more upside. He's more of the receiving tight end, Allen does a little bit of both. So maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need a guy that can block and can catch. Another sign that went down was, according to Ian Rappaport as well, is that the Chargers signed Joseph Barksdale to a 4-year, $22 million deal, which isn't that bad. Barksdale played for the Rams. I think he played for another team. Chargers got him, had a pretty good year, wasn't going to command big money, but is a tackle that can easily start. He's not a Pro Bowl guy, but he's going to be able to block for Phillip Rivers for the next 4 years or longer. So some news also as well. The Dolphins restructured Koa-Misi, their linebacker, and Ndamukong Suh's deals. Of course, Suh got the big deal last year, the deal that maybe didn't play up to what they thought he could have been, but they restructured that deal, freeing up some cap space, and maybe that was why they restructured it, because they knew they were going to make a trade like Maxwell and Kiko Alonso, and maybe they want to re-sign some guys. Mario Williams had a visit with the Dolphins. He was going to visit with the Giants as well, but as I said earlier, he looks like he's going to resign. It looks like he's going to sign with the Dolphins. Charles Johnson, a guy who was a great defensive end for the Panthers for a lot of years, was let go. He visited the New York Giants, or is visiting them soon. A guy that's a great 4-3 end. Just got power, really good size. The Giants could definitely use some pass rush help if JPP does not come back. Even if JPP does come back, they could use another guy on the other side of him. Charles Johnson can definitely help. And he's not a guy that is 35, so you're not going to have him for 1 year. You could probably have him for 4 or 5 more years. He's still going to make a lot of good plays for you. The Rams also let go of Chris Long over the last few weeks. He is visiting the Washington Redskins. This is a guy that, again, seems to me like a natural 4-3 defensive end. The Redskins run more of a 3-4, so maybe he plays outside linebacker. Maybe they put him in at a 3-4 defensive end. I don't know if he has the strength to really do that every play, or maybe he works in some nickel schemes where he does that. I don't know, but he's visiting Washington coming up soon. And then, of course, some cuts besides Mario Williams and Charles Johnson and Chris Long. Brent Grimes is expected to be released by the Dolphins soon. He hasn't been officially cut yet, but it looks like they're going to release him in the next few days. So Byron Maxwell, of course, takes over his spot. A guy that can play cornerback still, but I think with the cap hit and his age, maybe they don't want him still. Donald Butler was released by the Chargers, a linebacker that signed a really big deal, that had a really good year before he signed. After he signed his big contract, he really didn't live up to the hype. He's still a great linebacker, got some really good skills still, but he wasn't the star that they thought he could have been. And of course, Arian Foster was let go, a running back that's just constantly hurt. The guy, and that's the thing. That was a guy that a few years back might have been considered the best running back in the league. He just gets hurt every year. Texans let him go. A guy that can re-sign with the team, that doesn't need to be the lead back. He doesn't need the ball 25 times. He can go to a team like the Bears, let's just say, that Matt Forte left. They kind of run a bunch of running backs in a game, so maybe he can fill into that rotation. Jason Hatcher was let go by Washington, a defensive lineman that made a lot of good plays, one of those underrated defensive linemen that's probably going to find at least somewhere, a place somewhere else to sign. And the last guy that I had hope for, and obviously didn't pan out, at least with this team, RG3, Robert Griffin III. And with Kirk Cousins looking like the guy for that team, the guy that signed his franchise tag, it looks like he's the guy that they're going to want now for the next, I don't know how many years. RG3 is going to need a home. And he's probably not going to be a starter day one wherever he goes. He's going to probably be a backup somewhere. But see, that's the thing about a guy like that. He still has a lot of good skills. He still can throw the ball well. He can probably run the ball still. And he's still young. So if a team wants to take a chance on him, and maybe he can work his way into the starting role, maybe it can work out for him then. But I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to be a starter day one anywhere. Dallas, I think, could be a team that he could easily look at. Romo got hurt again this past year. He's not that young either, so maybe RG3 can step in, and if Romo gets hurt, if he gets hurt, RG3 can step in and be the guy that they need him to be, and maybe he can bring back some of that, hype that he once had before he got hurt. And I mean, there's just like going to be a lot of news going on in the last 48 hours or so. So after looking at some guys that were cut, I'm just going to basically go over some guys that I think where they're going to sign. And there's so many of them. I could go through a list of literally every free agent out there, but that would take too much time. So I'm just going to look at a lot. I'm just going to look at a lot of the main guys that, of course, media people and fans are looking at. Brock Osweiler is, of course, the number one guy. The talk of, Manning's gone. The Broncos have to bring him back. And I think that's where I think that's where he'll sign. And all of these of where I think they're going to sign are not guaranteed spots. I'm not saying this is where they're going to sign. This is where I think they're going to sign based off of what media personnel are saying, rumors, just stuff like that. I'm just speculating where they might sign. These aren't guaranteed. This is just what I think where they should sign. I think the Broncos are going to bring him back. I think they offered him a 3-year deal, roughly $15 million per year. If I'm him, I sign that deal, folks. The guy hasn't played 1 year yet. He played a couple games, 6 or 7 games. He didn't start a full year. Now, if he started week 1 up until the Super Bowl and he won it for him, okay, I can understand why you give him that deal. But $15 million, and here's the thing that makes me laugh. Bradford gets the deal that he got, and people are uproar. Oh, my gosh, how can you sign him to that kind of deal? That's unreal. How can you do that? He's not worth that. But Osweiler's worth $15 million per year? Are you serious? How many games did the guy play? I think maybe 10. And granted, the guy's got great size. I think he's 6'7", 6'8", got great skills. And when he played very well and can be a guy that can win games for him. And he could probably be a playoff winning type of quarterback for that team. All of that might be true. But it's not like he played it's not like he played a full year and won all these games for him. They won a Super Bowl with Peyton, I'm not even going to get mad because it's just what he might get. But the Broncos should sign him. Other teams might look at him. The Browns could look at him. Texans might look at him. If he doesn't sign with the Broncos, to me, it's assuming some other team gives him a bigger deal that he says yes to. But if I'm him, I take that kind of deal right now. RG3, as I said a couple minutes ago, is a big name guy. He's not going to get a big deal, but the Cowboys, Texans are teams he could definitely look at. San Fran would be a sleeper team to look out for. Kaepernick may not want to be there. RG3 can fit Chip's scheme perfectly because he doesn't need to run, but he can run. And if he has that speed still, and if that's how he wants to play, come on down, RG3, folks, because that's what he does best. Ryan Fitzpatrick, to round out the number of the main quarterbacks out there, he's got to re-sign with the Jets. I don't see how he does not sign with the Jets. This year was maybe his best year. Marshall had a good year. Decker had a good year. Almost made the playoffs. If you get a couple more, if you get a little bit better defense to help him out, and he has another year with that scheme, I think he could be a playoff type of guy. Not saying he's an elite talent, but I think he's on the right team where all they need is a quarterback that can make a couple good plays for him when they need him to. And I think he definitely did that this year, and I think he's deserving of a contract. And maybe a team looks to sign him somewhere else. I don't know, but this is his, I think, third team, and this is maybe the best year he's had. So I think this is where he should stay. Now on to the running backs, where the real meat of the free agent class is, especially this year. You got 5 or 6 running backs that are going to be guys that are going to start wherever they go. Doug Martin seems to be the guy that is just getting a lot of interest from a lot of teams. From Ian Rappaport, that there's multiple teams have interest in him. Giants could look at him. Texans could look at him. That's how I see it. The Cowboys could look at him. Dolphins could look at him. Miller is probably going to come back. Martin could probably look at him. And the Colts would be a team that I would keep as that underrated team that maybe they look at him. Frank Gore is getting old or older. Andrew Luck can't throw the ball 80 times per game, so they're going to need help. Maybe he can be that guy for him. As I said, Lamar Miller looks like he's not going back to the Dolphins at this point. I think they should re-sign him though. So I would say the Cowboys and the Eagles. If Ryan Matthews is not the guy and they don't draft a person, maybe that's the guy that they can look at. Matt Forte is another guy, of course. Guy who played with the Bears for 8 or 9 years. A guy that's 30 or 31 right now, but can still play another 4 or 5 years. In great shape, can do everything well, got great size. Packers, unfortunately, he's going to go from the Bears to the Packers. Maybe, I don't know. There were some Packers players that came from the Bears, so maybe they were trying to recruit him. But I think he's going to go for a team that's going to win. Broncos, Patriots are two teams that I would look at. He's at the end of the road. He has, 3 or 4 good years left. Just have him sign on a winning team and allow him to win that Super Bowl that he wants. Russell Okung, probably the best tackle in the free agent class, a guy who's been on the Seahawks, was a first-round pick, a guy who was seen as maybe being one of the best left tackles in the league. Kind of dropped off a little bit, but still I think is a great left tackle. Chargers, if they need a left tackle, maybe they go for Ronnie Stanley in the draft. Maybe they draft, or maybe they sign Russell Okung to help. The Oakland Raiders would be an underrated team I would look at. They have Donald Penn, who's pretty good, but Okung could definitely be a guy that maybe they move Penn to the right tackle and they sign Okung. Another guy, Osemele signs there. If you put Okung next to him, Derek Carr has got some guys that can help protect him now. As I said, Osemele looks like he's going to be signing with the Raiders. Mike Garafolo also put out that the Raiders were going to be the team to make the push, so obviously he was correct in that assumption. Jeff Allen, as I said, Eagles could look at him. The Bears could look at him. They need help along the interior of the offensive line. Kyle Long was put out to tackle, so maybe Allen could help out there. Antonio Gates, one of the veterans in this class, one of the best tight ends over the last 10 or so years. I don't see him leaving San Diego. Rivers and him have been great friends. They've played with each other for, I don't know, they've been teammates for, I don't know, last 10 years or 8 years. So I don't think he should leave unless he, again, wants to go to a team that is going to be guaranteed to be a playoff team, Broncos or a team like that. As I said, when Dwayne Allen signed his 4-year deal, Kobe Fleener, the other tight end, is a guy that I look at. The Bears would be a great team to sign him. Bennett looks like he may be out. They might want to trade him soon. Miller is a free agent. He might re-sign. But Fleener is the big guy that can catch the ball well. He has some upside still. He's older than Allen, I believe, but he still has a couple good years left in him. And that could definitely help, assuming that Kevin White also comes back and can play at the level that they think he can. Now on to the defensive side. This is where a lot of stars are right now. Malik Jackson seems to be the number one guy everybody's looking at. A guy who had an outstanding year as a defensive end, a Super Bowl winning defensive end. So he knows how to win. He can play in probably different schemes if they need him to. Mike Callis, I'm sorry if I pronounced his name wrong, from 9 News. A lot of the interest is coming from the Jaguars, the Raiders, and the Bears. Now, these are 3 teams that I think they're going to be the 3 main teams that he's going to look at, is because of the amount of cap that they're going to have to save to sign a guy like this. This is going to be a guy that's going to get probably $13 to $15 million per year. And a team that needs him but doesn't have the cap isn't going to sign him. So I think the Jaguars, Raiders could definitely be two teams that they look at, because they're 2 teams that have some of the most cap. And the Raiders have Jack Del Rio as their head coach, and he played for him, so there's kind of a fit there. I think the Bears are his best fit because he played under John Fox, playing in that 3-4. They need help at defensive end. He could fit that, and the Bears have the cap space, but I don't think the Bears are going to sign him to that deal. because I think the cap is just too much. So the Jaguars and the Raiders, who I would think will probably be the two teams it's going to come down to. Danny Trevathan, the other great Broncos player, the inside linebacker. To me, he has to sign with the Bears. That's just who I think is the fit for that is almost too good. They need help at inside linebacker. The Bears have cap. Played for John Fox. It seems too good to not go down. So I think it has to happen. Unless some team like the Titans or the Falcons, maybe Dan Quinn could use him on the inside as a linebacker as well. Or the Titans could use help. Zach Brown hasn't been re-signed yet, so maybe he fills that spot. But I think the Bears would probably be the main team that will look at him, and I think that they're definitely going to sign him if he wants to play there. Olivier Vernon is the guy that I said, as the guy I was talking about earlier. The Dolphins, if they sign Mario Williams, if they sign him to the deal, he received the transition tag. They may take that back. I don't really know yet, but maybe he's going to be traded. Maybe he's going to be traded. When the whole Maxwell rumor stuff went down, I thought they were going to do a Vernon for Maxwell swap. That's what I thought. Eagles could use some pass rush help. Dolphins could use a cornerback. It just works. It makes sense. But obviously not. Maybe he signs somewhere else. Bruce Irvin is another underrated guy. A guy that's played on the Seahawks linebacking core, played in different spots, can rush the pass, or can get to the quarterback fairly well, can tackle pretty well, got pretty good size, got great speed, can play end if you need him to. I think the Falcons are just a great fit. Dan Quinn, who he played for, is the new Falcons coach. They need pass rush help. He can kind of play that hybrid and outside linebacker role, so I think that makes perfect sense. And then on to the secondary, Eric Weddle and George Iloka, as I was talking about earlier. Iloka, Vikings, and the Browns are probably two teams I would think those are great fits. Both of the head coaches came from the Bengals, where Iloka played for. It just makes sense. Bengals, maybe they bring him back. Maybe some team that just needs a secondary help brings him in. Maybe the Bears look at him. But he might be the guy that gets paid more than teams think he will. Weddle is a guy that I mentioned before, but this is a guy that it's one of those things that if he was 3 or 4 years younger right now, he would be the number one secondary player the teams would be drooling over. Because he's a Pro Bowl guy, but he doesn't have youth on his side still. And from a Peter King article, maybe there's interest from the Patriots, Panthers, the Raiders, Steelers, teams like that. I think he's a guy like a Matt Forte of some sorts where I think he just wants to win. And I think if he goes to a team that does win, he's going to sign there. And I think that, again, is a really good match. I mean, any of those teams. I think if the Panthers sign him, that would be a great match because they could use help. Tillman's going to be retiring soon. Norman is probably good. Norman's going to be there regardless of who they bring in. Their safety help needs help. I mean, they got great play from underrated guys. Well, if you bring in a guy that's really well known, I mean, it seems to, work, at least to me. So those are some of the main guys that are going to be mentioned a lot coming up soon. And then some other guys, Janoris Jenkins, who was a cornerback from the Rams, a guy that could have gotten the franchise tag, but they chose Tremaine Johnson, the other cornerback, the guy who has more size, maybe has a little bit more upside right now. Jenkins is going to get a great deal, though. He's a great cornerback. I think his size may be some issue with some teams because I think he's only 5'10 or 5'11. Regardless of his size, the guy is great. I mean, the guy can play with the best of them, and he doesn't get a lot of media hype. And he's not, and I'm not saying he's like a star that he's going to get 80 million or so. No, but he's going to get a lot for a team that needs cornerback help. And then some defensive linemen to look at. Jay Howard from the Chiefs. Akeem Hicks from the Patriots /Saints, because he played for both of them. Damon Harrison from the Jets, and Nick Fairley, who played for the Rams, also played for Jim Schwartz. So maybe the Eagles look at him. I think your interior defensive line is set, but if Fairley's there, you can get him on a 1 or 2 year deal. Put him in a rotation with Cox and Benny Logan if he's going to be the nose tackle of that team. That would be a pretty good 3-man rotation of the interior of that line, and he can get to the quarterback because coming out of Auburn, he had a lot of hype. He was really good. So I think that's going to be maybe one of those underrated guys. The Eagles might look at him. And then the last couple guys, Tamba Hali and Derek Johnson from the Chiefs. Kiko's gone. Derek Johnson may be a guy that they look at. He's a Pro Bowl guy. Here's the thing, though. He doesn't have youth on his side. Weddle's the same way. These two guys, they have a lot of skill. Maybe they sign with a winning team. Personally, I think the Chiefs should bring him back. Hali may not come back. Johnson should definitely go back, especially if they lose Jay Howard and Tamba Hali in the same offseason. They still need some of that leadership on that defense. To me, I think he should re-sign. Tamba Hali, I don't think Doug Peterson will look at him. He might as a guy that you can sign on a 2 or 3 deal. The guy still can get a lot of sacks for you. I don't know if he can actually, but here's the thing. I don't know if he can play 4-3 defensive end. Maybe he can. In that aspect, maybe they bring him in and they run some schemes where they play in a 3-4. Barwin stands up. Hali comes in and it's an all-out blitz. Or maybe he can play end. I think he has the size to. I don't know if he actually ever did it for a certain period of time in his career with the Chiefs. But free agency is going to be underway here soon. But I want to thank everybody for listening in. It was a great show. Next 24 hours or so is going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to see what is going to go on next day or so. You're listening to 98.5 WNUW LP Aston.